Star Wars is a very political media franchise, telling the story of revolution against authoritarianism over its almost 50-year lifespan, borrowing from the politics and history of the real world, ranging from the rise of fascism in Europe to the Vietnam and Iraq wars. The methods of telling that story might vary, but the core remains the same, and despite all the laser swords and campy magic, the story can actually get pretty compelling and way more real than we give it credit for. And one of the elements that does show this a lot is the fact that they took this happily ever after and showed that it wasn't quite happy as we thought. And much like how Star Wars mimics real life, there are also some elements of real life mimicking Star Wars. Obviously not one-to-one, but sort of like poetry, it rhymes. And it all stems from everything that happened after this moment. For a little bit of a refresher to how we got to this, we have to rewind a little bit in Star Wars history. For around 20,000 years, the only government in the Star Wars universe was the Galactic Republic. Then concerns regarding on how the Republic was run led to the creation of the Separatist Alliance, or Confederacy of Independent Systems, which would lead to a 3-year conflict called the Clone Wars, which would end with the Chancellor of the Republic to restructure both governments into a new galactic empire. The empire would rule for 14 years before various rebel cells would begin fighting back, leading to an event called the Galactic Civil War, which would end with the death of the Emperor and seemingly peace being restored. At least for now. That's the basics that basically everybody knows. The specifics are where things get a little bit more complicated, both before and after the massive continuity reboot. And for the most part with this video, we're going to focus more on what happens with the Disney canon, but Legends might be brought up here and there because they borrow some elements of it, because as we all know, there's always a little bit of truth in Legends. Since all of this conflict and war began all the way back with the creation of the Separatist Alliance, let's start there. Why did the Separatist Alliance form? Of course, the various figures in the group had their own intentions, but ultimately, all of their issues can be summed up with one word: corruption. The Galactic Republic was in the hands of a corrupt bureaucracy for many years, only serving the interests of a certain well-off political class to the detriment of everyone else, primarily serving the interests of the core worlds to the detriment of the Outer Rim. And due to that fact, many Outer Rim planets flat out did not respect the authority of the Republic. You ever find it odd how many times our heroes get into shenanigans in the Outer Rim, usually involving one of them needing to buy something, and then the shop owners say that they will not accept the galaxy-wide currency? That makes literally no sense. You see, the name makes you kind of think, oh, it's because they don't want a paper trail. But no, they have a physical version that does not require a paper trail. And yet, all of them basically just say, no, the galaxy-wide currency will not be accepted here. That just does not make sense. The usual excuse being like, oh, usually they're dealing with criminals, but criminals deal with federal-backed currency all the time. That's clearly not the issue. It's because in the Outer Rim, they just do not respect the authority of the Republic at all, to the point where they will not even use the currency the Republic uses, which extends to everybody in the Outer Rim, including their own political class. Now, while the films focus on the bad faith actors who use the cause of this for their own gain, like Dooku using it to spread the Sith ideology, and the Separatist Council just being a bunch of corporate-backed shills who are trying to make their own bank, stuff like the Clone Wars TV show introduces us to people like Mina Bonteri and Becca LeWeiss, Separatist senators who seem to have very legitimate concerns and seem to have the best interests at heart, albeit not from the side that we as the audience call the good guys. And these very legitimate concerns literally never seem to get addressed in basically any Star Wars media. In the Clone Wars show especially, it shows that things get worse because the systemic issues that led to the divide in the first place end up getting completely exacerbated by the Clone War itself, allowing us to be introduced to the less well-off areas of Coruscant that are being underfunded in favor of funding this war. Which is exactly what Palpatine wants, as this serves as a prelude to fascism. Distrust in the existing institutions and pushing for the one true person to save the world, which can come from genuine distrust, or the distrust can be sowed by the figure in order to push the fascism, or more commonly, a little bit of both. And if you know anything about fascism, you know it's not a fast process. Like, people don't just magically one day decide, yes sir, please take away all of my rights to serve you. No, it's a slow process where your rights get whittled away bit by bit. People get propagandized into wanting it. And by the time the big event happens to push things over the crossing line, it's too late to stop it. The only slight difference is that Palpatine waited way longer than fascist projects usually take, but that's also by his own design. That way, he successfully muddies the waters to where the Republic ends and the Empire begins, while formally, the Empire is founded after Palpatine's decree. You could argue that the emergency powers given to him 3 years prior were the true start. Or if you're daring, the slow overtaking of the Republic from him 10 years prior, to the point where even people who were raised during the Republic believe that they were raised by the Empire, as was the case with Dedra Meero, who said that she was raised in an Imperial Kinderblock, even though that's statistically impossible for a woman her age. Because to most, there is no fundamental difference between the two. And Palpatine probably spent a little bit of extra time to muddy the waters with propaganda in the future. Now, I want you to keep in mind every single thing that I just said. And with that in your head, let's talk about the Rebel Alliance, or, to use their proper name, the Alliance to Restore the Republic. Why should we want the Republic to be restored? The Republic was a corrupt government that served the interests of the people in power, the Senate, the Jedi, etc. It was the thing that was so rotted that it allowed for the Dark Lord of the Sith to slowly take it over from within, and nobody noticed, because he just blended in with the rest of the corrupt institutions and did basically the stuff they wanted. According to the best numbers that I could find, the Republic likely had 24,372 senators, of which only 2,000 of them opposed Palpatine, with only 3 of them being consistent vocal opponents of him. Sure, these 3 senators saw that there were a lot of systemic issues with the Republic and tried to fix them. But that would require mass reformation of it as an institution that it clearly wasn't interested in. Whatever idealized version of the Republic that they had in their mind had died long before any of them got into office. And over the course of their character arcs, we see them evolve to understand aspects of this. But it's when they get to that one final part that they just cannot let go. Now, I can't necessarily blame them 100%. The only galaxy they know is one that had the Republic versus one that had the Empire. I don't think anyone reasonable would disagree that an imperfect, corrupt democracy is better than a fascist state. The problem comes from the fact that seemed to be the end-all be-all for them. After the Emperor was defeated, the Republic was back, and the Jedi Order was back. Problem solved. Did we address any of the concerns that led to the corruption of either of these institutions, thus leading to the rise of fascism of the Empire? Not that I'm aware of. In fact, it is worse, because in this new world, people have gotten a taste of fascism. So now people will compare and contrast the New Republic with the Empire, and any perceived failure of the New Republic will be used as a way to make the Empire look good, especially when there are Neo-Imperials still out there. Not even just in the Imperial pockets that were left over after the war, the Neo-Imperials very quickly became members of the New Republic on various levels. One of which happened because they literally didn't clean house when the governments changed. The other because the process that the New Republic had for rehabilitation was just the Empire's torture methods rebranded with a smiley face. Because at the fundamental level, not much changed. And as such, the exact same mistakes were made. The exact same outcomes were reached. Star Wars mimics real-world politics once more. Not to necessarily diss Mon Mothma. I like Mon Mothma. Her speech was amazing. Her character arc was amazing. But to compare her to real-life figures, I'd say she's reminiscent of Charles de Gaulle or Winston Churchill. They were all on the right side of the fascism versus anti-fascism struggle, but their ideology only goes so far. De Gaulle and Churchill hated the idea of their own countries becoming part of an evil empire forcing their ways of life on a population who doesn't want it. But they fail to see those tendencies when they do it themselves. Side note, I just want to mention this. Originally, when I was writing this script, I wanted to put Churchill in here, but then I figured that Charles de Gaulle would actually make a better example. But then, after I had finished writing it, but before I recorded it, there was an interview where
Dan Gilroy
compared Mon Mothma to Winston Churchill, so I guess the original comparison really did fit. Back to Mothma, she hates the Galactic Empire for all the super evil things they do, but fails to root it out at an underlying level, even if there's only slight differences. Another example deals with the subject of slavery in Star Wars. The Galactic Republic allegedly opposes slavery, whereas the Empire was known very well for its enslavement of the Wookiees. It's a huge point brought up in The Phantom Menace. Padme is absolutely shocked that Anakin's a slave on this Republic-controlled planet. And yet when they return to Tatooine in Attack of the Clones, after Padme's become a senator for many years, literally nothing has changed. In that same movie, the Republic literally introduces slavery via the clone army. And to just add another layer of irony to explain this, the clones in this scene are literally 1 year older than Anakin was when Padme first met him. And that was back in the era of the Republic. Mothma fails to see that the Republic in and of itself is what led to the Empire to form. Rather sees simply fixing certain elements as the thing that will fix the problem. Which is why one of the most common things that is said about the Rebel Alliance is that they flat out rejected any separatist who wanted to join them. Because the goal of the rebellion was restoring the Republic to what it was, even the things that made the separatists leave in the first place, regardless of whether they were legitimate concerns or not. And of course, Mon Mothma would think that. She was someone who benefited greatly under the system of the Republic. Meanwhile, we have many others, like Cassian Andor, Karis Nemec, and even Saw Gerrera, people who did not benefit from the previous Republic, which is what led them to have significantly more radical beliefs and more open to changes beyond simply just a change in governance. I mean, not to say that they were perfect, the no separatist rule was actually something that Saw and Mothma agreed upon, Saw's reason being more linked to PTSD than anything else. But you also have to keep in mind the difference between these two figures. Mothma was not just a rebel, she was someone who was going to rebel and then form the basis of the new society. Meanwhile, Saw Gerrera's purpose was more as an insurgent to bring the new era rather than lead the new era himself. A Star Wars version of V, if you will. And that is ultimately why the New Republic failed. They shouldn't have been the New Republic. They should have been something better. It's that classic saying of history. Those who don't learn history are doomed to repeat it. Which is why it is best for us to look through our historical mistakes and go, you know what, maybe we should try something different if this hasn't worked thus far. And I'm just saying, the fact that this is a lesson that someone who made a franchise that is quote unquote made for kids understands, and yet we have a lot of political figures who still don't seem to grasp that knowledge even as they are going through repeating the mistake a third or fourth time. Thanks for watching this video. Be sure to like, comment, share, subscribe, and click the bell to notify when a future video of mine comes out. And if you want more content from me, consider supporting me on Patreon.